everyone, Jim Coyle with Indiana Sports Beat Radio. Thank you, as always, for listening to our content. But for more in-depth coverage on the Indiana Hoosiers football, basketball, and recruiting news, go to thehoosier.com on 3. Now with On 3 and great national writers like Ari Wasserman, Andy Staples, and Steve Wiltfong for football. Pete Nakos, J.B. Shaw, and Joe Tipton's constantly breaking stories on the basketball side. And the local coverage from Alec Lasley, Kyler Staley, and Zach Browning. You can catch something new every day at thehoosier.com. Go there. Sign up today.
Brought to you by the Hard Truth Distilling Company in Brown County, Indiana.
So for the thousands in attendance and the millions watching around the world.
Time! 3 on the way. Oh! It went in! It went in! And Indiana wins the ball game! Know your role and shut your mouth, you jabroni! Float game for the win! Ayler's gone. Goodbye, touchdown, Indy! Woo! IU! America! They got a football team now!
Pretty simple. I win. Google me.
You know that I'm the cream of the crop.
Now, from the Hard Truth Studios, here's Jim Coyle.
Welcome back to the Hard Truth Distilling Company Studios on this Thursday. And of course, as promised, a visit by our good friend K-Bro. And glad to have you along, sir. Trying to get back out of that because we've seen about all of that we can stand. But welcome back, Mike. Of course, I didn't make that. We've had that for a while. So, but I love it. That's our affinity for K-Bro, Mike.
I know. We have affinity. You know what I mean? If you had affinity for me, you wouldn't show that graphic. By the way, obviously it was great being with Mike and all the other writers and at the Final Four. And I will say that reading Mike's coverage, while terrific, made me a little depressed because it realized how far I still have to go to be to be in his category as far as a writer. But no, it was a lot of fun and very fortunate that I covered another national championship season. Maybe I'm the good luck charm because I came back to Florida and they got it done again.
I think it's clear they could not have done it without you. I think
I agree.
That's obvious.
So were you there back in 06 and 07?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Those were a couple of the first teams that I covered. I started.
And I asked you, you didn't respond to my text. Did you give Todd your ring size?
No. That's fine. Oh. But it's interesting because people have talked about newspapers being irrelevant, and I have gotten more texts, more emails, more phone calls. How can I get the commemorative edition, including from certain SIDs who deride me during the season? So it's kind of everyone. You become a very popular guy this time of year when you have a championship edition out. This time of year. So, hey,
are you popular with the Chicago Police Department?
Maybe there's hope, but no, an amazing ride. I think Mike and I agree in terms of the guard play and the depth. It was a complete team all year long. And there were times when it looked bleak, Jim. I mean, the Texas Tech game,
Hey, I don't know how Houston lost that game. I've said it. I'm like, man, they turned that into a Houston game early. They mucked it up. It was defense. After the first 10 minutes of the game, Florida was on par to score 40 points for the game. You knew that wasn't going to happen, but you kept wondering because it went into the half and but I guess the adjustments, great teams, great coaches make the adjustments at halftime.
They do. But what it ends up happening, Jim, is, and I can't make this point enough, and I think it needs to be made more, frankly, because I've read some other things where it wasn't acknowledged, even in some really terrific pieces. Talent, you can't win it without the talent. No one does. We've got 4 decades of history at minimum, depending on how you want to cut the apple. We have back to 1988. Every single champion has NBA first rounders. Every single one. No exceptions. No, we had enough really good college players and great coaching and tough. I stood next to Kelvin Sampson 2 feet away from him on Monday night when he said this team was built to win the championship. And I was grateful that he said that, because then I had the ending to my column, because it had everything that you would want in a team, Jim. They were together. They loved each other. They played for each other. They played for their coach. They had a brilliant coach. They had everything. But in the end, you win all the games except maybe the last one or two with all of those qualities. But without the talent, without the NBA talent, it just doesn't happen. When it happens, great. We'll all stand and applaud. But we may be waiting another 40 years for that. My stat going back to 88 is compelling. But my friend David Glenn, who covers the ACC for an organization down there, you can find him.
That must be an easy job this last year.
Yes. David pointed out that since the draft was instituted, that was all the way back in the 1960s, there has not been a team that won the national championship without a top 30 pick. So mine's first rounders, his is top 30. That loops in Steve Alford and the 87 Indiana team and keeps going all the way back to the 60s. It's just, you have to have those guys. It's not negotiable. It hasn't been negotiable basically for all of modern college basketball history. So why do we keep dancing around the truth?
So do we think Walter Clayton's a first-round pick? I
don't think there's any question at this point that he will be.
That he's
it's just a question of how high he brought himself. And then if Thomas Houck makes the mistake of going into this year's draft, he may not be. But if he stays, I think he will be.
Yeah, I think he's sticking around, Mike, and he and Condon both said that today. I do think too that to your point, when it was 42-20, it was still early enough where I thought Houston didn't have the firepower to kind of put it away, and I thought Florida could get it under 10 in the final 10 minutes, that they would have a shot, and they didn't. They went on that run and they got it down to 3. So once they got it down there, you kind of had a feeling it was anyone's ball game in the last 10 minutes, Jim. And college basketball is a game of runs, and Florida stiffened up on defense. They kind of, what I wrote, Jim, is they kind of out Houston in terms of how physical they played, the defensive stops they made down the stretch. And it's kind of ironic that this team that was, known all season for its offense and last year was really lacking defensively, won the national championship on a defensive play.
Yeah, great point. Let me follow up on what K-Bro said about the defense. Okay. The turnovers, everybody keeps pointing to the number of turnovers Houston committed in the end. But the next to last one, I believe was in sequence, it was the next to last one, the one that Emmanuel Sharp committed when Florida executes a switch on a ball screen and leaves him driving against Condon. First of all, not the best situation for him. And he ignores an opportunity when Condon's not yet closed to do a pull-up because he wants to get deeper. And by continuing to advance the ball, you have Will Richard reach in from the outside and slap the ball off his leg. So it was a caused turnover. It wasn't an unforced turnover. And of course, the long to be famous, whatever you call that, I guess in the end it was just a thrown away ball in that sense, because it did not become a double dribble because Sharp refused to touch it, but it was all caused by Walter Clayton's brilliant closeout. And that was a phenomenal defensive play. Yep. It was so sudden and so amazing that we were all sitting there. I was sitting next to various different college basketball writers who cover this sport year round, and none of us could figure out who closed because it happened so fast. And to be frank, I think probably not many of us thought it would be Walter. That's how great a play it was.
Yeah, and I met when Bob Kravitz was on with us earlier. He had a piece out the other day, and it talked about Kelvin Sampson, and I wanted to talk about that because there's so many people in the IU fan base that still just carry this. I call it hatred. I mean, it actually amazes me because first of all, I'm like, hey, people, you should be PO'd at President Herbert. he's the guy who forced the issue. If you're going to be angry at somebody, that's where it should be. And then, yes, I understand he broke rules. Not going to defend that. But what my point would be is going 90 and a 70, that's going to get you in trouble. But it ain't bank robbery. And I can list a freaking bunch of schools real quick that were committing bank robbery, that were paying players, that were, with the help of Nike and Adidas, were buying players when it was absolutely against the rules and giving them the most gigantic advantage, which allowed them to remain at the status that they held. That is my beef with people who are so angry at Kelvin Sampson. I'm like, get over that, man. It was a speeding ticket is what he got. Yeah, it's against the law, but so is speeding. So put it in the right category. Compare apples to apples and oranges to oranges. That's my beef. I get over it, but I know there's another side to it.
Well, Jim, I tend to agree with you. Under the circumstances, 6 years removed from the dismissal of Bob Knight, with the open case against Oklahoma that was only a final resolution away at that point. It had already gone all the way through. They were rounding third and heading for home in the infractions process. So it was out there, and it wasn't any secret. And Indiana hires him anyway. So if you're going to do the anyway, then if something similar happens, then you got to eat it. You got to deal with it. You got to process it. You can't have. So what they did basically was they had their cake and they threw it in the garbage, is essentially the metaphor that I would use. They chose that particular cake. And then when it turned out that it was indeed that flavor, they threw it in the garbage. You have to do one or the other. You either can't hire him, or if you hire him, you have to deal with the repercussions that come from those relatively minor infractions, whatever those repercussions would be. I think you saw a decade later, schools that were in that circumstances fought. They fought, and most of the ones that fought, they ended up not necessarily prevailing, but surviving. I think that's the difference. And so I'm in your camp. I don't think that they should have hired him under the circumstances, given the likely backlash if anything like it happened. But once they did, they should have said, "Okay, Kelvin, you should have done this. We're going to have to do something." But he should not have been fired under those circumstances, given the relative insignificance of the alleged violations in 2000 and basically in the 2008 year, 2007, 2008.
And there was more to it than the phone calls, etc. But that's what he got in trouble for. Yeah, right. There was some questionable players on there doing questionable things. I get that. But that is not what he got in trouble for. And the NCAA changed the rule the next year. They didn't lose a battle in court like they did, and why they changed the ability to pay players. They changed that because they didn't have a choice. They lost in court. They changed the rule that Kelvin Sampson got in trouble for. They changed it themselves the next year because it was so stupid. So that's my beef. It's just like, dude, pick your battles and know the battle there. So, but in the end, it doesn't matter. He shouldn't have been hired, even though he was the best coach Indiana's hired since Bob Knight. Still shouldn't have been hired. That is when, as much people have beefed Kevin about, they wanted Chris Beard. So there were so many people that wanted Chris Beard on this Indiana hire, but I knew that was not going to happen under any circumstances, right or wrong, just wasn't going to happen. So I accepted it from that standpoint that I don't have time to deal with the minutia because it doesn't matter. It's just not going to happen. I'm not going to fight that battle.
Yeah. What does Santayana say? Those that ignore history are doomed to repeat it. So you got to be careful there.
But he was denied. Kelvin Sampson denied the national championship, and boy, did it look like it. But how about Todd Golden? Talked about him. He's a guy that nobody had really ever heard of a couple of years ago. of the people that like to compare Indiana fans. But just getting a player. He didn't do jack last year. I'm like, dude, you cannot compare a different situation, a different program, a different that. Things change. Things get better. Todd Golden is not the coach he was at San Francisco. He's better. He's wiser. He gets smarter. He got better. He hadn't won an NCAA tournament game in his first 2 years at Florida. Then he wins a national championship. Boy, can you imagine Indiana fans may have gone off the rails if Darren DeVries does not win an NCAA a game in his first 2 years. I can imagine. Can you imagine? That's why you've got to relax. Let things play out, man.
Yeah, I think once Todd started getting his players into the system, that's when it really took off. Because his first year, they could have gotten, Janai Broom his first year, or they had him visit. But, he already had Colin Castleton, and I think Broom probably took a better NIL offer to Auburn. But after that, when he started getting players that fit his system, he's a very, analytical mind. He had a very good staff. As a matter of fact, he's losing a couple of coaches, Kevin Hovde to Columbia and John Anderchek to Campbell, that were kind of his top offensive and defensive guys. It'll be very interesting to see how he replaces them. But very smart, very analytical staff, built it methodically, got transfers, but created a core at the same time. Will Richard was a 3-year transfer. Walter Clayton Jr. was a 2-year transfer. And then, last year, Riley Kugel was kind of a cancer, very talented kid, but, something was missing there in terms of how he connected with his teammates. So they go out and they get a guy from Elijah Martin from FAU that has Final Four experience. And that was kind of that final piece of the puzzle. The big guys, the young big guys, Thomas Houck and Alex Condon, a couple of 2-3 stars from nowhere. I think Alex Condon's 2 offers were Utah and St. Mary's. But they stuck with them. They developed them. They saw something in them. Todd's recruited very well internationally with Condon from Australia, Urban Klavšar, kind of a promising guard from Slovenia, who you're probably going to hear from in the next 2 years. So it's been a really good building job. The pieces have fit. And I think he's a smart coach, and he's got a lot of smart coaches around him. And I think, you saw that in the adjustments they made in the second half. It's all added up to this incredible run to a national championship. But, a lot like the 06 team, too, that kind of, came together at the right time. Maybe that team wasn't as dominant in the regular season. They were a 3 seed, but coming into the season kind of came out of nowhere. I mean, Florida was ranked 21st going into the season. I thought maybe they'd be a Sweet 16, Elite 8 team in the beginning of the season, but I did not see this coming. But it's just an amazing testament to the players and how hard they worked and the chemistry that they built.
Well, you talked a lot last year when Florida was in Indianapolis at the NCAA tournament. You talked about that they had the goods, that you thought that they were putting it together. I remember that conversation we had.
Yeah, they showed some promise last year, but where they were lacking was on the defensive end of the floor. I mean, if you looked at the KenPom numbers, they were 89-90. They couldn't get stopped. So they addressed that in the portal by getting Elijah Martin, who is a rugged kind of perimeter defender. I think Will Richard and Walter Clayton also got better defensively. And then Ruben Chinyelu, who's 6'10 with a 7'6 wingspan, altered some things at the rim. So they became a much better defensive team this year through personnel and through approach. They gave John Anderchak a little more responsibility there. And that was a difference this year. They were a more complete team on both ends of the floor. They were, I think, second KenPom in offense, 9th KenPom in defense. So that's where they made the biggest jump from last year to this year.
Yeah, Mike. So now we're looking forward to next year already. I have already seen multiple 2026, way too early, ridiculous, stupid, ignorant top 25s. I don't mean to be negative. I'm just
it's okay. It's okay
because they are stupid. Because none of these teams have complete rosters. They have a lot of them have cores. Like Purdue is probably not going to change much. But there's no way, even the ones that have you don't know what they're going to be like. Go back and look at who was number 1 in the preseason in college basketball? Kansas. Oh, yeah, that was Kansas. How did that work out? Go back and look at
here's the problem, Jim. Here's the problem. Because you're confusing the AP poll with people who actually write about college basketball year round. That's the difference. No, I mean,
good point. Good point.
Here's the oddity about these way too early top 25s. First of all, as much as you rail against them, and I don't blame you for any of it, people read them. That's why
I know.
That's why everybody does them, including the sporting news. But the real oddity of it is, like, when I went to do mine, and I began mine, I think Friday, I started fiddling with it. And I did a Google search just to see if anybody had done theirs yet. And no one had. So I did mine blind. And it's amazing.
Who'd you have number one?
What's that?
Who's number one?
I was going to put Houston number one when I initially did it. And then they got in because I thought they were going to lose to Duke. And I wasn't going to pick anybody to repeat. So I think I ended up putting Duke number one because they lost that game. If Houston had won it, they would have been number one. But
most I've seen have the familiar teams in the top 10.
But it's interesting. What I was going to say is so interesting is that all of these different people who have them, there's some similarity to them, even though we're not copying off each other's papers.
Right.
Because we're all basically submitting them at the same time and publishing at the same time. So we can't, I didn't have any conversations with anybody saying, hey, who you got number 10? I didn't have anything like that. I just went through and tried to do it myself. And there were a few things that I had differently. Like Louisville was way higher in everybody else's than mine. But I had them in the top 20. But most of them were kind of similar. So there is some validity to it. It's
do you
crazy.
Know who the Athletic has as number one?
Did I see?
No, yeah. Do you?
I don't
Purdue.
know.
They have Purdue at number one, bro.
See, that goes right back to what I've talked about when we were opening this. Okay, who's Purdue's first rounder?
Yeah.
When Kansas was the AP preseason top 25 number one, I laughed because I knew they didn't have anybody like that.
Yeah.
I was 100% sure that they didn't have one of those guys. With Florida, I'll be honest with you, I only came around to it in the last few weeks of the season because I started to see what Walter was capable of doing, and I got to the point where I kept saying, how can you not? And that's what after seeing him down the stretch of the regular season. And then, I'd already made my picks for the Final Four, and I thought that Duke and Florida had the best chance of winning it because they had those guys and they had great teams. But when I saw Walter in person in Raleigh, and I know it was against the 16 seed, but you can evaluate. And I saw him, and I'm like, this just doesn't make any sense. There's all this mock draft stuff that doesn't have him in. It doesn't make any sense. He's too good for somebody not to take him.
Yeah. Hey, K-Bro, is he the only first rounder you think off of Florida?
Well, I think to Mike's point, I think Houck and maybe Condon can develop into first rounders over time. But I think currently he's the only first rounder. But, I think Elijah and Will Richard could possibly go in the second round as well. I
asked that because if you go back and look, at least the last 6 years, there have been multiple NBA draft picks on the champions. UConn has, oh my God,
some of those were second, Jim. They weren't all first.
No. I'm not saying they were all first, but they had multiple firsts too, though. And it wasn't necessarily in the same season. It could have been the following season, but they were on the team that did the deed.
Well, I covered, the 06-07 team was the ultimate because Noah, Brewer, and Horford were all lottery picks in across that front line. Oh, and by the way, Al Horford is still playing in the NBA almost 20 years later. I saw him at courtside. It's amazing. The guy's a machine. How he keeps, Corey Brewer, I think, is an assistant coach with the Pelicans or like a staff member there. And I don't know what Joakim Noah is doing. Probably he's probably somewhere in the south of France having a bottle of wine or something.
I was going to say the answer to that question probably, K-Bro, is whatever he wants.
Yeah, exactly. He's living the life and stuff. So Jim, hey, let's get to this blue blood point because you're on.
Oh yeah, I forgot.
We're in a blue blood market, right? Indiana. I would say that Indiana and Florida right now are polar opposites, right? I would say that Indiana.
They are at the moment. There's no no disputing
in terms of
that.
in terms of the blue blood argument, I would argue that Florida is a blue blood in merit, but not in fan passion, whereas Indiana is a blue blood in fan passion, but not in merit currently. But yes, on
the fan passion is not even a discussion, so we're not even going to go there. The merit, I still hate to fight against somebody who has 3 national championships, but those 2 came like a bolt out of the blue. Nothing, no tradition really before that. You go way back, and not much in between.
Well, we had Norm Sloan and Vernon Maxwell and Lon
I'm just saying.
Mike
So
Miller almost won a championship in 2000. You know, that group with Teddy Dupay. And
to me, to be a blue blood, you got to do it over a long standard of time.
How long though, Jim? How long?
UConn has sustained. They are the shortest, the newest member of that club, in my opinion. But my God, they've done more than anybody. They keep succeeding. They just won
had a dip in the Kevin Ollie era a little bit.
But they did it. They've won. How many is it? 5 or is it 6 now?
6.
Okay, and what? 3 different coaches?
3 different coaches.
Okay, I don't think anybody in college basketball has that. Indiana has.
Kentucky does.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. I apologize. But a blue blood.
Kentucky has 4 different.
Of course.
Yeah.
But they fill in the 3. Yeah. But that's a stature there. And I just, there's no doubting the greatness and the greatness of the achievement. But,
well, listen, Billy Donovan
but Todd Golden, if he continues this, then that's going to be harder to ignore that argument.
Billy Donovan was just inducted in the Hall of Fame over the weekend, Jim. He has 467 SEC wins. The only other SEC coach that has more is Adolph Rupp.
Well,
so
the SEC was not what it is today.
SEC wins in the ledger for Florida during that span. I mean, that was a pretty good run from 96 to 2015.
Yeah, but the SEC was like the ACC was last year back then.
They made the NCAA tournament 15 and 19 times. The SEC was as terrible as you think. I mean, the year that Florida went in 06, you had LSU in there. That was that big Dave Davis. In 2014, they had Kentucky, the Julius Randle team. I mean, there were some good SEC teams during that run. It wasn't completely terrible. Maybe a little top-heavy, but you had other teams there that challenged Florida.
Oh, I would say it was better than the ACC was last year.
Oh, definitely.
Because the ACC was absolutely horrible.
Mike, for me, what I told Kevin he interviewed me for the article yesterday, and what I told him was that I think the difference, and I don't know whether this is a hurdle that can be cleared, is that at the real, no doubt, blue bloods, the ones that we talk about, Carolina, Kansas, Duke, UCLA, that basketball is where it begins and ends. Kentucky, and that I don't see that ever being the case at Florida. And maybe you can, but that's the element
Football
of it for
school.
me. Yeah, that's the element of it for me. And the one thing that Kevin didn't put in his article, that because everybody runs out of space sooner or later, is that I think that there is a value to being the coach at Texas or Ohio State or Florida, because you don't get picked apart, especially in this era, for your recruiting, for your scheduling, for how you run your offense and defense, all of which every coach at those true blue bloods has to cope with. Right now, I'm telling you, at Duke, they're going to be talking about inbounds plays from now until the first ball goes in the air. They're going to talk about inbounds plays, and I get it. I think if the same thing had happened to Florida on Monday night, I don't know that would be true. No. I think they'd be talking about the quarterback situation.
They'd be talking about DJ Lightweigh's shoulder. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think that's the F word, as I pointed out in the story. It still lingers over them. And it's kind of like, are they going to care in a game in November when they play Mercer? You know what I mean? Are they going to still pack the building? That's always been the issue, I think, at Florida. You know, they do a pretty good job on the SEC games. But, I pointed out in the article about even after Donovan won the championships in 06 and 07, the next year they held Midnight Madness, only the lower bowl was filled, and Billy had to cancel it because it was a bad look for recruiting, And that those kind of things don't happen at blue blood schools. But maybe it will turn. Maybe they had a very good turnout in San Antonio. I thought the fans were pretty good there,
Definitely.
all things considered. And but will they pack the arena in the November game on Tuesday night when they're playing the North Florida Ospreys? That's what then you can start to say, hey, maybe we have something here as far as being a blue blood school.
Hey, don't be cracking all the Ospreys. That's a great bird.
North Florida Ospreys are coached by a Pittsburgh guy, so just saying.
How about that?
See, I told you. Look at you.
It all comes around to Pittsburgh in the end.
Always, baby. Mike DeCourcy from the Sporting News, Fox Big Ten Networks. What's up next for you?
Sleep, Jim. Sleep is huge. No matter what John Rothstein says, I am sleeping in April.
Well, yes, I wish I could join you, not literally, but doing the same thing. That doesn't. We're 24/7, 365 here, baby. But appreciate it. I hope you enjoy it. Enjoy your weekend, and we'll talk to you next week.
Next Tuesday, we'll talk to you then.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Kay.
Hey, bro, what is up next for you, my friend?
The spring football game on Saturday. But and
this Saturday?
Yeah, this Saturday. And then they'll have the championship celebration, which will be nice. It's and we'll listen, there'll be a lot of transfer portal stories for basketball too. Apparently they're in on this kid Xavier Lee, who's the best point guard out there in the transfer portal. Tommy Houck has a connection with him. They played at the same school. So there's a feeling that, especially with Walter Clayton leaving, that there's an opportunity to jump in, get some playing time and be a part of what looks to be a program that's definitely, right now at the top of the mountain and can be on the rise. I think you have to strike while the iron is hot here. You're the national champions in terms of attracting players, and you can say, hey, look, you can come and be a part of a winning program and have fun and win championships.
Sounds great, brother. I'm gonna work on a deal to try to get K-Bro during the off season to join us once a week. I have to send him out to a very nice dinner. What's the nicest restaurant there in Gainesboro? Yeah.
We could go to Embers or Mark's US Prime or what have you, but we'll work on that. But it was very nice. Also, by the way, one of your other guests, Zach Osterman, was named USBWA Basketball Beat Writer of the Year, and I was there.
Wow!
For that. So
I didn't see that. That's awesome. I can't wait to Zach's on with us tomorrow.
Very good for Zach. You can pass along your congratulations to him. I was there. It was a very nice dinner, very well done. They did a nice tribute. They inducted the late Bob Holt to the USBWA Hall of Fame. John Clay from the Lexington Herald Leader. I'm sure some of your guys, great writer, good friend. That was really nice. It was a nice experience, and got to go to get some barbecue at Pinkerton's, which was a good little spot in San Antonio. Beautiful city. I thought it was a really nice city, and I thought, everything compact. The media hotel was right there. Alamo Dome was a good venue, and it was obviously Florida bringing home a national championship. It's kind of crazy to think that they did it again, but it is testament to Todd and his staff and the players. And Walter Clayton Jr. is he's never going to have to buy a drink in Gainesville again, I can tell you.
Yeah, there you go. And neither will K-Bro. Appreciate you, my friend. As always, look forward to doing it again. It's always a blast.
Yes, yeah. Fun to catch up. Thank you, buddy.
Thank you, sir. K-Bro on with us. Hello, everyone. Jim Coyle with Indiana Sports Beat Radio. Thank you, as always, for listening to our content. But for more in-depth coverage on the Indiana Hoosiers football, basketball, and recruiting news, go to thehoosier.com on 3. Now with On 3 and great national writers like Ari Wasserman, Andy Staples, and Steve Wiltfong for football, Pete Nakos, J.B. Shaw, and Joe Tipton's constantly breaking stories on the basketball side. And the local coverage from Alec Lasley, Kyler Staley, and Zach Browning. You can catch something new every day at thehoosier.com. Go there. Sign up today.